Welcome to this Blender tutorial series where I'll show you how to create this stylized desert 3D scene. So this tutorial series will be broken up into 5 parts. So in this part, in part 1, we're going to be creating the large cacti and the small cacti, and we'll also be using geometry nodes to place some spikes on the cacti. And then in part 2, we're going to be doing the lighting, and we're going to be creating the sky background and putting some clouds in the background, and then we'll also be creating the cacti materials. Then in part 3, we're going to be creating the large rocks and the small rocks, and creating the materials for the rocks. Then in part 4, we're going to be modeling the plants. We're also going to be making the ground object and adding that animal skull into the scene. And then we'll also add the mountains and then do all the materials for those objects. And then in part 5, we're going to be using geometry nodes to distribute all of the different desert models on the ground. And we'll be using the weight painting to weight paint where we want the objects to be with the geometry nodes. And then we'll add a bit of haze to the scene to make it feel more like a desert, and we'll render the scene and do some compositing. And if you'd like to purchase the finished project files of this tutorial and help support the channel, you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. The links are in the description. And when you purchase the project files, you'll get all of these stylized desert 3D models, and you'll also get the entire finished 3D scene and the final renders. Also on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, you can get access to 3D models and assets, tutorial files, artwork project files, procedural materials, geometry node modifier setups, and lots more Blender content on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, so checking that out is a great way to help support this channel. And some ways to support the channel here on YouTube are by checking out the YouTube memberships by clicking down there on that join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoy this tutorial series, you can also send me a little tip by using the super thanks feature here on YouTube. And all of your support really does help make these free videos possible. Now later in the tutorial series, we're going to be adding this animal skull model into the 3D scene because that's so classic to have like a cow skull or some animal skull in the desert. And so you can of course model your own one if you want to, but I'm going to be downloading this animal skull 3D model from BlendSwap. I'll have the link in the description to the model if you'd like to download it. It's a free 3D model. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the creator for providing this 3D model here on BlendSwap. So you can just make a free account on BlendSwap and you can download the model. Now to help us with some of the UV unwrapping, I'm going to be using the UV Squares Blender add-on, and this is a free Blender add-on, so you can get it here on GitHub. I'll have the link in the description. So on GitHub, you'll click on code, and then you can download the zip file. However, the add-on creator is also selling the add-on on the Blender market, so if you'd like to help support the creator, then you can also purchase it here on the Blender market. So either way, on Blender market or on GitHub, I'll have the links in the description. So here I am in a new scene in Blender, and my screencast keys will be right down here in the corner so you can see what buttons I'm pressing. So we're going to start by modeling the large cacti. So I'll select everything and let's just delete everything. And I'll go to the add menu, let's go to mesh, and we're going to add a cylinder. And I'm going to scale the cylinder down by like a 0.3 so it is smaller. And then now that I've scaled it down, I'll press Ctrl A and we'll just apply the scale so that's the object's new default size. Let's also save the file. So I'll click on File and we'll click on Save As. And I'll just save this as desert scene on my computer with my project files, and I'll save this. And then as you're working on the project, just press Ctrl S to save it. So let's go into edit mode, and I want to select every other edge and scale it in to kind of make the shape of the cacti. So let's click here to go to the edge select, and I'm going to select this edge and then hold down the shift key and select every other edge. So just go along here holding down the shift key and just selecting every other edge. And I want to scale them all in, but I don't want to scale them down. I just want to scale them in. So after I scale them, I'll hit Shift Z. Shift Z is going to exclude the Z axis. So you can see it's sort of making like a star shape. And I'm just going to scale it in a little bit, just like that, so that we kind of have that texture of the cactus kind of going back and forth. So just something like that. Let's go back to object mode, and I'm now going to press Ctrl 1, which is going to add a subdivision surface of 1 level. If we go here to the modifiers panel, we just want to make sure the viewport and render are both set to 1. Let's go back into edit mode, and I want to delete the bottom faces, so we can go down here to the bottom. We'll go to the face select. We'll just select this face and we're going to delete the faces because we really don't need it. And then we're going to select this top face here. I'll press 1 on the numpad for front view, and let's bring this up on the Z axis a bit. We'll now select everything. We'll bring everything up on the Z axis so that the origin point is on the very bottom, and that is very important because when we use the geometry nodes to distribute the cactus on the ground, it's going to be distributed from the point of the origin. So let's select the top face again and go to front view, and I can kind of rotate it and move it over a bit, and then I can extrude it. Let's extrude this out and rotate it a little bit just so that it's slightly curvy. And we'll extrude it up again, kind of rotate this around, maybe scale it down just a little bit. You can also go into the wireframe view and just box select all these faces there, scale that down a little bit more so it's a little bit smaller. All right, let's select the top face again, and we're gonna go to front view, and I'll extrude it out again, kind of scale it down a little bit like that. And then let's zoom in really close, and we're gonna extrude it out just a little bit, scale it back in, extrude it out again, and scale it back down, just like that. So it's really small and it kind of comes to a point. And I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut right here, and I'll left click and drag this up and left click there so that it's nice and smooth. So we'll go back to object mode, we'll use the object context menu, and we're just gonna shade that object smooth. So let's go back into edit mode, and we're gonna model like those arms of the cacti, those parts which are coming out. So what I'll do is go into wireframe, and I'll go here to the vertex select, and I'll just click and drag just to box select all these vertices. I'll duplicate them with Shift D. Let's bring this over here, and I can scale this down, make it quite a bit smaller. Deselect everything, we'll just box select these ones here and scale them down a little bit, maybe bring this up a little bit. Deselect that, and then we'll just box select the bottom ones, and let's start to rotate it, and I can extrude it, and we'll rotate it, extrude it again, and rotate it, and extrude it again, and just stick it right in there. All right, go back to solid view, so you can see we now have one of the arms. And if I go to wireframe, again, I'll just box select some of these and kind of rotate them a little bit. So it's a little bit curvy, maybe bring this over a little bit. So something like that. So it kind of comes out and goes back and then goes over a little bit. Now we're going to be duplicating these quite a few times, and so before we duplicate them, I want to actually UV unwrap them, because in the material I want to add basically like a wave texture which is going down so that some parts are lighter and some parts are darker. So I want to UV unwrap this, and then we can duplicate it and we won't have to re-UV unwrap all the cacti. So we'll go into edit mode and we'll deselect everything, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select one of these loops right here, and let's go down to the bottom and hold down the Alt and Shift key and select that loop around there. Now let's go over here to this one, and I'll hold down the Shift and Alt key, and I'm going to select that loop right there. And then if I go into the wireframe view and kind of zoom in here, I want to hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that one there. And then as well as that, I want to select the top parts. So we'll go up here to the top, hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop there, that one there right on the top, and then hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that one right there. So with the top, the edges and the bottom selected, I'll hit the U button for the unwrap settings. Let's choose Mark Seam. So if you go back to solid view, the seams are now shown with the red there. So let's select everything, and I'll hit U again, and we're going to do unwrap. So now what I can do is go over here to the UV editing workspace, and you can see this is what the unwrap has done. So it's unwrapped it and opened it up. But there's a problem here, and that is that it is kind of stretched and being rotated around. So I'm going to be using a Blender add-on called UV Squares. Now the UV Squares is a free Blender add-on, so if you'd like to download it, you can download it here on GitHub. So you can just click on code and then you can download the zip file from GitHub. Or if you'd like to help support the creator, then you can purchase the UV Squares add-on on the Blender market. So either way, I will have the link to UV Squares in the description. Now to install the add-on, you're just going to install it like any other Blender add-on. So you'll click on edit, you'll go to the preferences, and then in Blender's user preferences here on add-ons, you're going to click on the install button. Then you'll just locate to where you saved the add-on, you'll click on the add-on, and then you're going to click on install add-on. And then if you don't see it here on the search, you just need to search for UV Squares and just check mark the UV Squares to enable it, and then you can close Blender's user preferences. So once you have the add-on enabled, you can press the N key to open up the side panel and make sure you're doing this in the UV editor. And then you can click here on UV Squares, and you just want to select everything, and then also press the A key to select all the UV editing. And we're going to click on 2 grid by shape. So 2 grid by shape is going to straighten it out. And so when we add the wave modifier to the materials, the wave modifier will actually look straight and it won't be stretched at all. So we're going to be adding that now. So let's go over here to the shading workspace, and I'll click on new to add a new material, and I can rename this large cacti. So let's hold down the Z button and go into the material preview so that we can see it. And then I'll go to the add menu, and we're going to search for a wave texture here in the shader editor. Let's drop this down here, and let's put the color up to the base color of the principled shader so we can preview it. And then I'll also be using the Node Wrangler add-on in this tutorial. So if you don't have the Node Wrangler enabled, you can go to edit, go to the preferences, And here on the add-ons tab, you can search for node and you can just enable the Node Wrangler add-on. So it's built into Blender and I'll show you how to use it in the video. Just close the user preferences and we're going to select the wave texture and then you can press Ctrl T. And that is going to add the texture coordinate and mapping nodes, and the texture coordinate and mapping nodes are going to tell the texture how it's placed on the object. Now I want to use the UVs because we just UV unwrapped the object. So let's take the UV and I can put that into the vector instead. And now you can see that we have this nice wave and it starts up here and then it goes all the way down. And here on the scale on the wave texture, I could turn this up to like a 10 so that there are lots more of those lines. And so that is good. So we will be doing a more complex material to make the stylized material for the cacti later in the tutorial series. But just for now, I just want to make sure that looked all nice. And so now we can continue with the modeling. So let's go back here to the layout and I'll press Ctrl S to save this again. So let's now model the other cacti. So I will duplicate this object in object mode so we have another one. And one thing that I also want to do is select this cacti, go into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that bottom loop there. And I'll just scale it down so it's a little bit smaller. And then do the same thing for this object. So we'll select this object, go into edit mode, hold down the Alt key, select that loop there, scale it down just a little bit so it kind of gets a little bit smaller as it goes in. And then let's go to front view and I can go to wireframe and I'm just going to box select the top part here and bring it down a bit, maybe move this over a little bit, and we can deselect this part here, kind of rotate that over, deselect everything. We're just going to box select this part and maybe make it kind of curvy, so something like that, and maybe bring this part all over a bit just to make the cacti look a little bit different. Maybe even scale this up a little bit. And then just to select this arm, you can deselect everything, hover your mouse over this piece and press the L key to select the linked vertices. Let's go back to solid view and I can scale this down and move it up and also maybe rotate it on the Z axis a bit and move it over here. So we're just going to make 4 unique cacti. So we'll make this a bit smaller, maybe deselect this part here and just bring this bottom part down like that. Maybe just box select this part here and bring that down a little bit. All right, and then press the L key with your mouse hovered over that arm. We'll duplicate this and we'll rotate it and we'll make a second one. Maybe this one could be a bit bigger, but then maybe I'll bring this down a little bit so it's not quite as long. And we're just gonna make 2 more cacti. So we'll select this one and we'll duplicate this one and move it over. And we'll just do the same thing. So go into edit mode and you can maybe scale the cacti. Maybe this one can be a little bit shorter as well. You can press the L key to select that arm there, and let's maybe move it up a little bit, maybe scale it down a little bit, and just make it a bit more random. And I think I will scale this entire one down a bit smaller just so we have a smaller cacti. And then I'll select this one again. Let's duplicate this one, move it over, and we'll go into edit mode. We'll go to front view. I'm just going to deselect everything, box select these top pieces here, kind of move them over a little bit. Maybe select these here and move them over a little bit. Maybe bring this up a bit. And then to make it a bit random, we'll just select this piece. We'll scale it up and maybe bring it up. We'll go to top view and I'm going to rotate this. And I'm going to duplicate this one and rotate it over just so we have another one. Let's make this a bit smaller. And this one, I think I'm going to add 3 arms. So we'll move this one over like that. And then select the entire thing. Let's go to top view, duplicate it, and rotate it over. So I'll go back to object mode, and there we go. We have 4 different cacti. So I'm now going to be creating one of the spikes. So I'll press Shift-C to center the 3D cursor, and I'll go to the add menu, and let's just add a cube. And I can scale this cube way down by like a 0.3, so it's much smaller. And then I'll press Ctrl-A and apply the scale. Let's zoom into the object, and I'll go into edit mode. And I want to scale it in on the X-axis and the Y-axis, but not the Z. So after I scale it, I'll hit Shift-Z to exclude the Z-axis, and I'll type 0.1 and then enter. Let's go back to object mode and move it over here so I can see it, and then I'll go back into edit mode and I'll bring it up on the Z-axis, just bring it up like that, and then I can go to the face select. We'll select this face and I want to scale it in and merge it. So what I'm going to do is just hit the M button and we're going to merge at center. So that way there's just going to be one single vertex there in the center. I'll go back to object mode and I'll use the object context menu to shade it smooth. And one more thing, if I go back into edit mode, let's go to the face select. I'm going to select the bottom face and I will just delete that bottom face. So let's go back to object mode and I'm now going to create a geometry node setup, which is going to place the spikes on the cacti. So I'm going to select the cactus here. Let's go over to the geometry nodes workspace. And if you don't have the geometry nodes workspace, you can click on the plus here to add a new workspace. and go to general and you can choose geometry nodes. So here on the geometry nodes, let's click on new, and I can just call this spikes, and then let's create a simple geometry node setup to place the spikes on the cactus. So I'll go to the add menu and we're going to search for the distribute points on faces. We'll drop this here. I'm also going to go to the add menu and I'm going to search for the instance on points. Let's drop that there. And then the cactus has disappeared. That's because we need to go to the add menu and add a join geometry. We'll put the join geometry after the instance on points, and then the original geometry can go up to the join geometry, so that way it adds the original geometry. So now to add the spikes, I'm going to go to the add menu. I'm going to search for an object info node because we need to give it the object data. So we'll drop the object info node right down here, and let's put the geometry into the instance on points. Now here on the density, let's make this a very small number, like a 0.1, so there aren't very many of them. And then for the object here, let's click on the eyedropper and we're going to actually choose the spikes. And now you can see there is one of the spikes, and if you turn up the density, there's going to be many more of them. Now I don't want any of the spikes to be overlapping each other, so here on the random, I'll change this to Poisson disk instead, and this is going to give us a distance minimum value, so that there's going to be a minimum distance between each spike. So I'm going to turn this to a 0.1, so that there isn't any spikes overlapping each other. And then here on the density max, I will just turn that to like a 3. And then let's change the scale, so I'm going to click right here and drag down to change all values at the same time, and I'm going to change this to like a 0.23 so that they're a bit smaller. And then also you can see the rotation is a bit messed up. So what I need to do is take the rotation from the distribute points on faces, and we're going to put that into the rotation. So this way it's using the rotation value of each one of these faces. So now you can see those spikes there are on the cacti. And then there aren't very many spikes, so I want to make more of them. So I can simply turn up this density max to make more and more spikes. And I might just go with like a 30 there on the density max. And maybe I'll turn the scale a little bit smaller to like a 0.3. All right, that's pretty good. So now what I can do is select the other cacti. So let's go back here to the layout to do this, and I can select this cacti, hold down the shift key and select the other cacti, and then lastly select this one here. So this one is selected last. So I'll now press Ctrl L, and we are going to click on copy modifiers. So now all the other objects have the modifiers of the active object. So now we have the spiky cacti. So now I want to kind of organize the scene a bit better. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and select all the cacti. And I'm going to press the M key to move them into a new collection. Let's click on new collection. And I'm going to call this collection large cacti and click on OK. So now this is just in its own collection. So all these objects here are in their own collection. Let's also select the spike. I'll press the M key to move it into a new collection. Let's click on new collection and I can call it spike. I'll click on OK. And then on the spike collection in the outliner, I can click on the check mark just to hide it because we don't actually need to see it. Let's save this again with Ctrl S, and I can now model these small cacti. So I'll go to the add menu and let's add another cube, and I can bring the cube over here and bring it down. Now this cube here, I'm going to scale this way down to like a 0.1, so it is much smaller. I'll press Ctrl A and apply the scale, so that's the new default size. Let's go into edit mode, and I want to scale it down on the y-axis a bit and then scale it up on the x-axis a bit so it's a bit longer, and maybe even make it a little bit thinner. All right, now I'll go to the face select and just select this face here, and I'll hit G to grab and bring it up on the z-axis a bit. Maybe select everything and bring them up on the z-axis a bit so that the origin point is there on the bottom. Then I can select the face and scale it up on the x-axis a bit. Let's press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I can extrude it out again and scale it up on the x-axis a bit. Extrude it up and start to scale that down. Extrude that up and then scale that down. All right, so something like that. Maybe select this one here and scale it in a little bit so it's a bit smaller. All right, and then this bottom face right here, we don't actually need it. So in edit mode, we'll just select the bottom face and we're just gonna delete the faces. Now I wanna make this side part here be coming out a little bit. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I can left click and right click so the loop cut stays there in the center. And then I can scale this all the way up a little bit, scale it up like that so it's more smooth. And then let's also go to the vertex select. I can hold down the Alt key and select the loop of vertices there, and I'll scale them on the Z-axis, and I'll type 0 and enter just to flatten it, and we can bring it up on the Z-axis a bit. Let's go back to object mode, and then I can use the object context menu and just shade it smooth. And I want this to be very low poly because we're going to be duplicating many of them throughout the scene, so they should be pretty low poly. So let's go back into edit mode, and then I want to make those little parts of the small cacti which are kind of coming out of the larger parts. So select everything. You can duplicate everything and maybe scale it down a little bit, scale it down a bit smaller, and I can rotate this piece and kind of stick it right here, maybe move it in there. So there's another little piece of the cacti right there, and I believe that this type of cacti that we're modeling is called prickly pear if you want to look up reference images, it's called prickly pear. So let's go into wireframe. I'm going to deselect everything, hold down the Alt key and just select that loop there and maybe scale it in a little bit so it's a little bit thinner. I can also hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices there, and I'll double tap the G key to activate the edge slide and just bring it up a bit. And then I'll press the L key with my mouse hovered over the vertices, and let's duplicate this. I can rotate it over, we'll scale it up a little bit, and I'll have another piece coming out there, and we'll duplicate it again. Let's put another piece down here and maybe make this one a bit smaller. Also, I want to duplicate this one again, and we're going to have a really small piece, and this piece is just going to be popping out of this one right there. I can go back to object mode, and that is going to be the first one. So in object mode, I'm going to duplicate this and I'll bring another one out here, and I'll go into edit mode, and this one I'm going to select everything and scale it out so it's a bit thicker, and then I'll deselect everything, just press the L key with my mouse hovered over these pieces, and I'm going to delete all of them, and then this piece here I'll select everything, scale it down and bring it in a little bit just so it's a bit smaller and farther down. Let's also go to wireframe. We're just going to select this bottom part here and scale it up so it's a bit bigger, and then if I select the entire thing I can squish it down a little bit. Alright, just like that. So we have just another piece there, and that one's just going to be a small piece. So we'll select this one again, and I'll duplicate it and bring it over here, and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm just going to deselect everything. Let's go to wireframe, and I'm going to box select all of these pieces here. Let's bring them down and scale them in a little bit so it's a little bit sharper. Maybe bring the entire thing up a bit, and then if I press the L key to select that entire piece. Let's scale this piece up a bit and make it a bit larger. This piece here, I'll select this piece, scale it down, rotate it a little bit, just make it a bit more unique. And this piece here, I can select this piece and I'll move this one right over here, and I'll just stick it inside this other piece, stick it in this piece of the cacti, so we have two of them. And I'll duplicate one more, rotate this one over and scale that up a bit. And then this one here, I want to rotate this one and scale it up so it's kind of a big piece. Alright, that is good for the next one. So I'll move that over, and then I still want to make two more. So I'll select this one, duplicate it, and move it over. We'll go into edit mode and pretty much just do the same thing. So I'll select this piece, and let's put it right over here. Just stick it inside that one. Select both of these pieces, and let's maybe rotate them and scale them up a bit so it looks a bit different. This piece here, I'll select this piece and maybe rotate it and make this one a little bit smaller. Alright, and then this piece here, we can just select that piece and we're just going to delete it. And this piece here, we'll select this one and this one here, and we'll delete both of those. Alright, that's going to be the next one. We'll select this one again and we'll duplicate this over, bring it over on the x-axis, and we're just going to make one more. So for this one, I'm going to delete these two pieces, and maybe I'll scale it up a little bit just to make it a little bit more unique. This piece here, let's rotate it and maybe scale it up a bit. And these pieces here, let's maybe rotate them a little bit more over, and maybe the entire thing, we can bring it down. Let's also select one of these and duplicate them, and we'll kind of rotate this one over so that there's one of them just kind of coming out of the side here. And I'm just going back over to one of these, and I just wanted to make one with a bit more detail because some of these prickly pear cacti do have a lot of these little kind of things popping out from each other. So I want to have some of them which are very detailed. Now another thing you could do to some of these to make them look a bit more unique and interesting is to go into wireframe and just box select the top parts here and kind of rotate them and scale them. And then if you just hold down the Alt key and select some of these loops, you can kind of scale it in and kind of have it rotate over a little bit. So some of them can be a little bit more thin and kind of curve a little bit. So I will select this with the L key and I'll duplicate them and just put a few more here and there. Maybe duplicate this again. We'll have maybe a smaller one coming right there. And we'll just do that for a few more of these. So kind of selecting the loops and kind of rotating them so they're a bit more curved. Maybe this one in here, scale this one down a little bit more. Maybe bring this one in a little bit. Just really making some variation and making them look a bit more unique. Alright, and that is going to be it for my 5 prickly pear models. So now I want to add the same geometry node setup so that they all have the spikes. So if we just click on the cacti here, you can see it has geometry nodes with the spikes, and let's actually rename the geometry nodes here to spikes as well. So with this selected, I'm now going to hold down the shift key and select all of the other prickly pear models, but then I'm going to lastly shift select this cactus last. I'll press Ctrl L and I'm going to click on copy modifiers. So it copied the modifiers, but you can see it also added the subsurf, but I don't really want the subsurf because it's just going to add too much detail and I want to keep the models very low poly. body. So if I select each one of these, I can just click on the X here to get rid of the subsurf. So let's delete the subsurf for these 5 models. So now they all have those little prickles. Now let's select all these models here, and I'll press the M key to move them into a new collection. Let's click on new, and I can just call this small cacti. We'll click on OK. So now they're nicely organized. So we have the large cacti and the small cacti. So I'll press Ctrl S to save, and this will wrap it up for part 1 of the Stylized Desert tutorial series. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed following along with this part. And when part 2 is released, it'll be right up there on the end screen, and I'll also have the link in the video description when it's released. And if you'd like to help support me and this YouTube channel, you can also purchase the finished project files on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. The links are in the description. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.